here we are. This is Sex Love Psychedelics, and I'm your host, Dr. Kat, bringing you psychosexual conversations that will leave you intellectually turned on and hungry for more.
You know, listening to lectures on the concept of cultural appropriation as it relates to, you know, indigenous practices with psychedelics, and how do we mitigate that as an issue, you know, especially as more white culture is introduced to these practices. And one woman that I listened to, that I loved this, her answer, it was by creating an exchange. And you prevent taking when you know what you're bringing. So what in your lineage are the rituals from your family, so that you can connect with that? Or if you have still shame around them, or you still have a lot of disgust around it or rejection around it, can you do the healing work around those rituals from your family? And you may have to go far back in order to discover what those are, but then how are you bringing that into the space with you? Mm-hmm. So it's not just a taking. And I thought that sat with me so well. And it led me to go through this whole process of reclamation around, you know, my family's history with Catholicism and all the shame that I ended up having out of that, because the dogma didn't allow me to be who I was. But that's this dogma versus just creating a loving relationship towards its ultimate messages around love.
Another beautiful question, Kat. You know, I was just spent a beautiful weekend with two dear sisters of mine, psychedelic therapists, and it was so rich because it was so reciprocal. And I think reciprocity is so essential. And I also very much believe in working within our own cultural context to the extent that we can. I know that, you know, we have our own kind of Western molecules that I'm trained in: MDMA, ketamine, thank you, LSD, 3-MMC. I love these medicines. And I'm a big ayahuasca girl. And, you know, it's dicey, right? Like I personally wouldn't sit with peyote, for example, given that it's an endangered plant and it's really meant to be kind of stewarded by indigenous peoples who've been working with this particular spirit for eons. You know, I think that the medicine of ayahuasca is needed in the world. I think we need this in the world. And, you know, the ayahuasca tourism that continues has not been good for the jungle in many ways. And there are foreigners who've been duped by faux shamans and have been harmed in that way. And there's been fighting between tribes and all kinds of things that the Western colonial impact has had on the sort of desire for the experience. So personally, you know, I like to work with that medicine with people who have spent like a lot of time in the jungle in a good way, who've kind of made their kind of navigation and work in reciprocity with their teachers, right? Like I'm not pouring ayahuasca. It's not my job. But I know who pours my medicine, and I know who taught them how to pour their medicine. And I know that they have a very real relationship with that person, and that person, like, I know where they live and kind of, you know, it's like, there's a line. And I would go to that, and I intend to go to spend time with this particular person in the jungle. But I think that the world needs these medicines right now. And I don't want to get too caught up in identity politics around this. I think we need to be cautious and careful and respectful and loving and make sure that we don't cause more harm. And that means, yes, we have to be, you know, in reparations, like, and that's in our own country. Like, that's not about indigenous tribes in the Amazon. That's about like racism in the United States. That's about like people of color on drug charges, right? For probably cannabis and crack cocaine. And that's a whole different kind of thing than this question that I'm really passionate about.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like I can do anything in the drug space without talking about that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
About the systemic oppression, about our obligation to be willing to have messy conversations as white people towards the liberation of all of us, and specifically communities of color in this country.
Sure. And it comes back to the very first question that we opened this up with, the concept of trauma. Trauma exists systemically as much as it does within one person. There's not just the micro, there's the macro. And what is perpetuating the trauma is when these aren't being witnessed and seen. So these conversations are really important for us to be able to, witness and hold space for that, just as much as we are taking into mindful consideration of how we're contributing or not, or changing.
And the willingness to make a mess, right? To make a mess, right? I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but like, I'm willing to speak at what I see, and I'm willing to learn, and I'm willing to be a good partner and an ally, like, because that's the only thing that really makes any sense to do. And because, like, Bell Hooks said the first crime of patriarchy is against men. I believe that, right? The people who are seemingly winning in a system of oppression are not winning at all.
Yeah.
And so this collective liberation that requires, yes, attention to specific communities that have been systematically oppressed, requires our attention and work and reparations and like, as we get to be just together more.
Well, that was fun. Thanks for tuning in, lovers. And if you want to experience more ecstasy and sexual liberation, head over to sexlovepsychedelics.com and learn about how you can join me for any one of my online or live events. And while you're there, grab my free guide on sex and psychedelics. Remember, this podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Please contact your healthcare provider and local law before pursuing any of the products or psychedelics discussed. And one final note here. I make this show specifically for you. If you're loving the show, then be sure to leave me a review in iTunes or Spotify to let me know. Happy to be here and happy to serve. I'll see you next time on Sex Love Psychedelics.